All right. Chapter 1 essay. Why do we create monsters? Yes, here we are, already starting off with an essay. Summer school is fast. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about these questions that are at the top of the page, but I first want to go down the page a little bit and talk about some important dates. The final draft of the essay is due by Monday, June 29th, essentially 2 full weeks from today. 11:59 p.m. You have all day Monday. Be sure to follow the out-of-class essay guidelines for matters of format and style. If you don't know what those are, go back to Canvas, go to the navigation, go to modules, look under introduction. Right, the introduction, the module is filled with handouts that are really important. One of the most important handouts is the out-of-class essay guidelines. Please read through those. Take it very seriously. Listen to the video that I made that goes with that. Okay, because those things matter. Be sure to include a word count at the end of your essay. Thanks to modern conveniences of our computers, that's pretty easy to do. Remember, you must meet minimum requirements, including word count, sources, and subject matter, which of course we'll be talking about. No late essays will be accepted without a verifiable medical excuse or legal issue. If you know you're going to have a problem, talk to me. Send me a message. Don't not turn in a paper and then come back and say, "Oh, I had a problem." That's not usually very good. Now, I don't like to just toss you to the wolves, so to speak. We kind of break down the process of writing. We're going to begin with the submission of a thesis statement and topic outline. That is due on Canvas by Friday, June 19th, 11:59 p.m. That is this Friday. Okay, that is just a few short days away, so we have to get working right away. Please have MLA citation entries for one source. The source may be from our textbook. I want to see how well you can handle MLA. And of course, there's MLA handout and worksheet, not worksheet, handouts, plural, I should say. Again, in the introductory module. There's also videos that go with them. You might want to make sure you listen to the videos to make sure you really understand what's going on. A participation grade will be assigned for this, so you get points for this. Now, the class will be divided after we do the outlines. The class will be divided into Canvas groups to workshop rough drafts. Okay, I divide the whole class up into groups on Canvas, and you basically each get your, shall we call it, a mini canvas to work with. Okay, there's a canvas within the canvas, so to speak. I will post an announcement with instructions on how to get to your group Canvas page. So I talk about exactly keystroke by keystroke what you need to do. Because if you've never done a group work assignment on Canvas, it can be a little tricky the first time you do it. Submit your rough draft to your Canvas work group and to me by Wednesday, June the 24th, 11:59 p.m. Submit the completed peer editing sheets to your Canvas work group and to me by Friday, June the 26th, 11:59 p.m. So in other words, you get your rough draft in by the end of day Wednesday. You have 2 days to read everybody else's rough draft and complete a peer edit sheet for each of those rough drafts, and they will do the same for you. Okay, the idea is you get feedback from others, as well as you get to kind of see what other people are doing, which is often very helpful too. Now, the minimum requirements for this paper. This is what you have to have as a bare minimum. At least 1,000 to approximately 1,400 words, right? That little squiggly line in front of 1,400, that's approximately. A strong essay structure, including introduction, concession, rebuttal arguments, main body, and conclusion. Okay, Now, if you're not familiar with these terms, this is all very new to you. Please, again, go back to the modules, go to the introductory module. They're the standard argumentative essay structure. Look at that. Watch the video that goes with the handout. That's where I really talk about the structure of an argumentative essay. And it's something that we're going to spend the whole semester learning how to do. But I'm kind of telling you right up at the very beginning just exactly how it should go. Now, you need citations from at least 2 sources. One source can be from our textbook. In other words, 2 can't, but 1 can. Our textbook. So you take one of the articles, perhaps the article that you're doing a question for, and then you have something else, whether it's from another book, an essay, an article, maybe a website, maybe a movie, maybe a television show, heck, maybe even a video game. Who knows what your second source could possibly be? And you can always have more. 2, it says at least 2. If you want to have 4, 5, 10, well, 10 may be a little excessive, but the point is you can have more than 2. MLA format and presentation and documentation, including correct works cited list. Again, this is our first time doing this, at least as a class. Check out the handouts and videos on Canvas. Make sure you follow them. If you happen to have a copy of the MLA handbook, and many of them are available pretty easily to find if you need, that's fine. But also, there's a number of websites that you can use, including some websites that are, again, on our Canvas modules. Go down where it says web links, and there's some, again, there's some places to go that will teach you about MLA, show you the proper format. Bottom line is it's not really that hard to do. It just takes a little bit of time, a little bit of familiarity, and you'll be fine. Now, let's go to the beginning. If you haven't done so already, you should watch the video that I made for the introduction to chapter 1. And in that introduction to chapter 1, I basically talk about almost all of these articles. Okay, so the articles introduce this idea. Why do we create monsters? Stephen King, the very famous horror fiction writer, he begins our class. He begins the semester, Stephen King does, talking again about what is the appeal of the horror story. Why do people want to be scared? Now, immediately following the Stephen King article is a 2-page excerpt from Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Now, you can see, looking at this handout, I don't have any questions directly about Mary Shelley, but you should read it. It's a very interesting passage from the original story. It involves the actual creation, or the waking up, if you will, of Frankenstein's creature. Remember, Frankenstein is actually the doctor. The monster we typically call Frankenstein's monster or Frankenstein's creature. It has no real name of its own. Hitchcock, in the piece called Conception, of course, conception means beginning, right? Susan Tyler Hitchcock talks about Mary Shelley and her friends and how they got together one summer in Geneva. And Mary Shelley eventually came up with the idea of Frankenstein, the story. Right? Hitchcock talks about all the influences all around her, okay, all around Mary Shelley. What is going on politically, what is going on personally, what is going on scientifically in the world. Electricity was being discovered and experimented with, things like that. And essentially, in Hitchcock's article, we can kind of get a sense of how Mary Shelley's art basically worked. In other words, how she kind of came up with the idea of this story that has been so incredibly powerful. Strangely enough, and you may not know this until you read Hitchcock, there's another author who wrote a piece called The Vampire. Now, vampires are very old creatures, old monsters. They predate Mary Shelley and her friends by a long ways. But this one guy, his name was John Polidori, he came up with a story of the vampire that was different than what vampires had been like ever before. He is the one who made the vampire a gallant figure, a person who moves around in high society, wears a tuxedo for breakfast, that kind of thing. That story, which becomes Dracula by Bram Stoker by the end of the century, but it has its origins in John Polidori's work. So it's very fascinating to read this Hitchcock article. Del Toro and Hogan also talk about vampires, much more familiar vampires, if you will. Chuck Klossman talks about zombies and what zombies are, what they represent. And he has an interesting idea about zombies, where he doesn't think we're the zombies, but the zombies are all the tasks that come at us. Peter Brothers talks about Godzilla, the famous monster from the movies, made immediately after World War, not immediately after, but shortly after World War II. Scott O'More writes on the Momo Challenge, which is our first discussion of internet monsters. Internet monsters. We had monsters that people talked about. We had monsters people wrote about. We have monsters that people made movies about. Now we have monsters that are on the internet as well. Lastly is Asthma. Asthma talking about monsters in the moral imagination. And his argument essentially is about how monsters prepare us for real life problems. Sometimes maybe not quite so dramatic as a monster, but sometimes maybe that dramatic. And he has some interesting examples of that. Now, if you go through all these questions and look them up carefully, they're all listed here. Question 7, question 5, question 8, question 8, question 9, question 9, question 8, 10, 7, 6, or 8. If you don't like any of those questions, I throw in a bonus question for you. Consider the issue of creating monsters as a function of human fear. Choose a monster that is largely forgotten in today's world, such as from an ancient civilization of your own choosing. Now, when I say a largely forgotten monster, I'm not talking about mermaids or werewolves. Nobody forgot about them. Nobody forgot about the dragon. I'm talking about ones that we don't really think about too much anymore. Argue how that monster functioned and why the fear it embodies is no longer experienced, or at least no longer experienced in the way that made it relevant in the past. So this is an opportunity to go into the ancient past, whether it's from the West, from the East, from other parts of the world, from the part that we now call North and South America. But there are monsters that have been around for thousands of years. And sometimes we overlook them because, for whatever reason, maybe they don't have the power that they used to have. That's why I said the fear it embodies is no longer experienced. Anyway, it's an opportunity for you in case you don't like any of the other questions. So I leave you with this. Read all the articles in chapter 1 before you make your decision. Okay? Read them all. It doesn't take that long to read these. Look at the questions. Look at them, think about them. What would you most like to write about? And that's what you should do. Good luck.